Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Niall.
And I'm Kyle, and this is the penultimate episode. Is that a fair
I mean,
word?
We're not finishing the podcast after episode 300.
It's like,
just this is episode 300's Eve.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
I just think I don't know, for some reason every time we hit a new 100, it feels like a big shift to me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's consciousness ascension that I'm sort of maybe the more episodes we do, the higher, more elevated our consciousness becomes.
I think by episode 500 we will be able to see into the fifth dimension.
That would be so sick. So
Yeah.
we have to hit like the threshold. Like we're currently in 3D.
Yeah.
This next 100 episodes or so will get us to the threshold where we start peering into other dimensional realities. Is that
Yeah, I wish I could remember the name of the fucking like 1D world or whatever, the like theoretical
Oh,
thing, something world, flat world,
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, we're
In the first 100 episodes, we really were very like fucking whatever that's called, flat world or whatever.
where Mr. Game and Watch resides.
No, it's 2D.
Oh shit, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, isn't he from like Flatville?
Remember
or
Flat
something?
Stanley?
I do remember Flat Stanley.
Yeah.
Have we brought up Flat Stanley on the show before?
I truly don't know.
Had a Flat Stanley that I drew as a kid. I'm wondering how universal this experience is as a kid growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. I had a little Flat Stanley that I drew and then laminated and then mailed off to different family members, and they had to take pictures with Flat Stanley in different places. Do you remember this?
Yeah, we had one for my like second or third grade class that when we had like a sister school or whatever in another country, and people would go on vacations and stuff, and like so there was a person that had just gone back and forth to England, I think, so that like they took Flat Stanley with them, and it was like so there were a bunch of pictures from everyone's Flat
Yeah.
Stanley journeys, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like I truly I get the baseline appeal for like an 8 to 10-year-old, you know, of that thing.
Yes.
But the more you think about it, the more you're just like, this is you're just like taking pictures of a piece of paper in different places around the world.
Yeah, but it's your piece of paper that you crafted. Maybe we could inject some pizzazz into this idea and reinvigorate.
We'll make
in
an
our late
It
20s,
Gets
early
Weird
30s.
Flat
Yeah,
Stanley
like-
for listeners to send us pictures.
Yeah, we'll listeners can like go travel to like the Grand Canyon with like a cutout of like Bigfoot or something.
What would be actually kind of fun is to create Nick Gets Weird Flat Stanley and have people print it out and like color it and take pictures of it at like cryptid places.
That would be very sick.
And
The
like
only
haunted
problem-
locations and like that kind of thing.
The only problem with this is then people have to start swapping addresses, which I cannot advocate for.
Oh no. I'm saying we make one that we just put the PDF like on like
okay.
out
Okay.
there, and then
Yeah,
people
that's-
can print it out and take pictures and send them to
See,
us, and
this
we'll
is-
catalog them.
This is why we keep you around. You're the ideas guy.
I'm not here's a baseline for listeners. Don't share your address with other
dear
people
God,
in the
do
community
not.
unless you know them personally. This isn't me thinking any of you are shady. It's just a general protocol that I'm gonna go ahead and just put that at the top here, you know.
Yeah.
If we end up doing this and designing the It Gets Weird, we'll have to come up with a better name. But
the Weird Stanley. That's so
Fuck.
stupid. Maybe that's just gotta be it.
I mean, it's kind of fun. Like, it really goes to show that we're almost at episode 300 and we still put that little effort into naming things. Like, for those of you in our Patreon, you're well aware of this. How we have It Gets Weird TV, It Gets Weirdish, where we for some reason watch movies. Like, and we had It Gets Wrestling for a little bit before that got spun off into its own podcast. Check out the Outside Dive if you haven't. It's Jules and I. It So, maybe that's the low effort naming convention that we need to just follow and call him Weird Stanley.
Yeah, Weird Stanley the Bigfoot, or we could have all kinds of different. Weird Stanley could be like a genre of
a shapeshifter.
yeah, it could be all kinds of critters, and
starting in episode 300, we're really gonna start figuring out that Weird Stanley lore.
Yeah, it's kind of like maybe it could be like Paul from the movie Paul, where like it's an alien, but he's got like a human name.
How many times are we going to reference the movie Paul on this podcast?
Until we watch it on It Gets Weirdish now.
Fair. Yeah, we do have to watch that sometime. I literally bought the movie because literally when we started doing It Gets Weirdish, Jules recommended Paul, and I was like, oh, but like I want to do, I was really starting off thinking about like, okay, Mothman prophecies and like stuff where it's like a little more not prestige, but a little like less of a light comedy. But I realized that I was being silly and just bought Paul, and now it's been like a year that I've just owned a DVD of Paul and we haven't watched it. So
we will watch Paul, and that is a promise.
So not to like totally derail us into the actual episode or anything,
right?
But I did prepare an episode this week, so I figure we should do that instead of just creating projects that we will, I would say about 50-50 actually follow through on.
Well, do you think
considering our track record and all,
Oh my god. Do you think oh shit. What was I going to say? I was going to say that it would be really funny to me if we did an episode and we like even released it with like like an actual subtitle of like this is the topic,
yeah.
But then it's just diversion and tangent for the entire episode and we never get into it.
It's our spaghetti-geddon.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, it would be if we had a guest, I feel like that would be very, very easy to do. Well, maybe we'll see if we can rope Garrett into
next April 1st, 2023, April 1st, we'll get Garrett on, and you'll be like, "Oh, I can't wait for the new It Gets Weird episode." And then you'll listen.
Here's the thing: we'll make it our JFK episode.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
And then it just won't be anything.
Oh no, that one you can't do that. We gotta put it on something that like nobody will ever give a shit about, like fucking Loveland Frogman Returns. I mean, people love the Frogman.
Yeah, I like
everybody
love.
You know what? You can't.
Hey, the Frogman has his own merch shop.
Yeah, there's nothing that you can do that would make the tangent bit funny. With we'd have to come up with our own cryptid. I'm sorry. I've derailed long enough. What the fuck?
So today we're gonna talk about the Dropa Stones.
Okay. So this is a name I've heard before.
Yeah.
You might refresh my memory when you start talking about it, but I've definitely heard of this. I don't know to what extent.
There's a couple different reasons why you might have heard of this that we'll kind of touch on as we go through this, because it has some tie-in to, it might have some tie-in to your Yellow Emperor episode.
Okay, I do remember this.
And it also has, not to get ahead of myself, some Ancient Aliens tie-ins.
Okay,
so
I remember this now. Yeah.
So we're going to go back to China. We are going to hang out on the border of China and Tibet in the Bayan Karaula. Yet again, blanket notice for It Gets Weird. Pronunciation is we're doing our best here. So we're in the Bayan Karaula Mountains, and we're going to talk about the Dropa Stones.
Okay.
And also the Dropa, which I guess is also an alien race, and also some other stuff. I'll just start this here. We're going to talk about the story first. There is the lore, and then there is the the real world, and we'll get to that later. But for now, this is the story of the Dropa Stones.
I definitely read the story of the Dropa Stones when I did the Yellow Emperor episode, but I don't remember what it is. So this is perfect.
All right. So there was a team of archaeologists back in about 1938 that were doing a dig in the Bayan Karaula Mountains, and they found a series of interlinked caves going throughout the mountains that seemed to be kind of artificially carved. Uh, there were a series of tunnels and underground storerooms, and the walls, especially in certain areas, seemed to be very squared off and almost like they were glazed or kind of covered in a way that made it seem artificial. And almost like they were cut with like some massive heat source.
Okay.
And on these walls, they would find in various chambers, they would find these carvings that depicted stuff like the rising sun, the moon, stars, all joined together by these small dots. Now, they also found a these lines of very neatly arranged graves. They contained skeletons of some form of humanoid, but they didn't look like humans because they were unnaturally like spindly, kind of like gangly bone wise, and they had large, overdeveloped heads.
Mm,
So very, very big heads, very kind of like pipe cleaner bodies, you
okay.
know?
Okay. I think I actually have seen a supposed photo of these before, and another fact about this story is I am recalling, but I'll hold on in my pocket and see if you actually come to it later. So
There's a good chance we will. But this is one of those stories that like they're much like a lot of ancient alien stuff. You kind of have to just do the like. I'm gonna just throw. You have to do the kayfabe first. You have to do
right,
the like. This is the story, and then here is all the
right.
stuff that they like massaged
Yeah,
to
this is
make
what
it
I'm
fit.
buying into to make the rest of
Yes.
it all work.
So we're starting in kayfabe. We'll break that later.
Okay.
Um, an open hand slap. So basically, they found these graves. They were arranged in these neat lines, and they were basically thought, okay, these are maybe some species of ape or something like that. But the leader of the team, a Chinese archaeologist named Professor Chi Pute, pointed out the fact that hey, we've never seen apes that actually bury each other, that have some sort of burial skill.
Can you imagine how much funnier apes would be if they did though?
It would be very funny.
That would be hilarious.
Imagine the phrase "imagine if apes buried each other" is like out of context a very funny phrase to just like spring on a person, because it's really not outside of out of context.
And think how much funnier that phrase is if we're talking about ancient aliens, kayfabe.
Yeah, see, there it makes some sense because those apes have probably been seeded with like Anunnaki DNA or some shit, and
Right.
they're developing their prefrontal cortex. What if I part of me just wanted to tweet, wouldn't it be funny if apes buried each other and just like let it ride on my Twitter account? I might do that later. That's
For
kind of
play
fun.
or for sport or like
Oh, just to see what happened,
or
you
just
know?
to see what happens. Yeah.
Because sometimes it's just fun to like make podcast jokes in a public forum. So they were studying these skeletons, kind of checking the different grave sites out, and they stumbled upon this large round stone disc.
Mm,
It was kind of buried in the dirt around one of these graves, and they started to look at it and like dug it out, wiped it off, and everything. And it's this big disc that has this hole in the center, much like a quote unquote Stone Age gramophone record, is how it was described. And there's this kind of like fine groove that spins around it.
okay.
Now they did some closer inspection on it, and they found that the groove is actually a continuous spiraling line of very small characters that goes continuously across the surface of the record. I'm going to call it a record because that's how it got referred to in a bunch of these things. It's the disc, if you want to be more specific or like more true to
The
form here.
frisbee.
Yeah. Um, they basically they just pocketed this. They just like took it with them because no the symbols weren't anything anyone could like read. It
Mhm.
wasn't a language that we were aware of. Um, but it was some sort of hieroglyph.
What if they translated this frisbee's language eventually, and all it just said was it's Nerf or nothing?
That would be very interesting for it to happen in like 1938.
I guess
You
that's
know,
fair. Yeah, aliens were on to the Nerf craze well before humanity was in the 90s.
yeah. I don't even know. I feel like Nerf is one of those things that if I looked it up, it's way older than I think it.
That
I
could
like.
be
I would think it
true,
is.
but it was a mainstay in the 90s and
Yeah.
early 2000s for me, so
Yeah. And I had Nerfs and Super Soakers and all
oh,
that good
yeah.
shit. Remember when kids played outside, Kyle?
And
So,
weren't busy fucking playing Minecraft on their fucking phones.
oh man, was Nerf the Roblox of our childhood?
You know what? I think it was.
So it took experts about 20 years before someone tried to like and really kind of cracked any of the hieroglyphs on this disc. It was just kind of stuck in a um in like storage in Peking uh when a professor 20 years later named Dr. Sum Un Nui broke the code and started to kind of decipher what this language was and what was actually being written about here. Um and this is when all fucking hell breaks loose because what he finds out this thing is saying is effectively some stuff about aliens.
Okay, so this finding is like pretty big deal for the existence of extraterrestrials and like so who's suppressing the information, or am I jumping ahead of myself?
No, you're well. I'm actually literally
Oh my
you're getting to
god.
the next point. Here.
Incredible.
So he only shared this with a very select few because as once he tried to get it published, um, they were suppressed by the government, by the scientific community. The Peking Academy of Prehistory forbade him to publish his findings.
Mm,
Now, we're a couple years later in 1965. So we're like almost 30 years beyond the finding of these discs originally. Or this disc, sorry. They eventually find supposedly 716 of these discs.
oh, well that's okay. Now hold up a second.
Yes.
Who has custody of the bodies and the discs at this point?
The discs are at a university in Peking.
Okay.
And I think some of them end up in like the one that they originally find is I think at a university in Peking, and then other ones end up at museums. Maybe put a pin in that note, and we'll get back to it in a minute. So finally, 2 years later in 1965, Professor Sumo Nui and four of his colleagues were finally able to get permission to write their story, and it appeared under this title in a scientific journal. It was the grooved script concerning spaceships, which, as recorded on the discs, landed on Earth 12,000 years ago. Now, that might have rolled off the tongue a little better in the native tongue. I don't know. But that was the name of this paper that was published on the findings of the translation of this disc.
Okay.
And this led to some more stuff, and this led to them finding, going back to the caves and finding the 716 other discs that I guess they just missed the first time. There's surprisingly not a lot of information about that that I
is
found.
a little surprising, unless of course they just went through them all and they all said the same shit.
It's like when you go to like a used record store and they're flipping through the bin and it's just like the $1 bin and it's all Barbara Streisand records.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like you're going to the used DVD store and there's about 500 copies of Johnny Mnemonic.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same kind of idea. I think I know what happened here though. I'm assuming what happened is these aliens have seeded many planets and they were on their way to go and distribute these to all the planets.
Okay.
But they fucked up somewhere and crashed on Earth, leaving behind all of the discs that they had planned to distribute. That's my guess.
It's like the golden record that like this. Okay, here's the fucking funny thing that this is a bit of a tangent, but I think it's really funny because one of the things that people talk about with this story, this isn't the only place where there's like a disc with like hieroglyphs that has been found in an ancient culture. And one of the things people talk about is just like basically like what is this? Like why would they do this? When we as a society sent a golden record on a space probe out into space, that was our inclination.
Yeah.
Why is it that we're so special that an ancient society wouldn't have had the same idea?
Yeah, that's totally
or some
fair.
alien race or whatever. Like it. So just like the whole thing of like why would they do this kind of doesn't cotton to me. Like I'm not saying any of this is real. I'm just saying that I wouldn't discount it on that point alone because we literally did the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really funny.
Do you like how insane would it be? Like, I have thought about occasionally, I like to go and I like to sometimes I entertain myself when I, like, think about stuff. And one of the things
Other times, do you bore yourself? Like,
well,
what?
other times I'm just not paying attention
Okay.
to my thoughts. No, I have thought about like because whenever that golden disc that we shot out into space gets brought up, and or even just like thinking about like satellites that we or whatever that we
Mhm.
shoot out into space, I just think to myself like, imagine we get like a blip on a radar somewhere, and when we see what it is a golden record of some far off planet and they have just like their own crazy shit. I would be it's
They've had
cool.
the same idea, and
Yeah,
they just like there are gonna be ships passing in the night. Like our record goes to their
yeah,
planet, theirs comes here,
pretty much.
and we just end up like, I,
Discover each other simultaneously. Like,
how do you know on an alien record we're supposed to play it at 45 or 33 though?
I mean, that's a great question. But surely we can get an adapter in there to really
Yeah,
make sure that we can play that thing.
we'll rip it at both and then see what sounds better, and we'll
Yeah.
make that designation. So yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about this because I have some stories of like other. This gets linked to some other like prehistorical discs, or and so I was thinking about this, and I'm like, there's enough of these things that it's like it's not that weird that this might be like a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, now we are getting into the translation now. So Dr. Sumun Nui uh translated the discs that he had access to, and they told a story of a space probe that came to Earth from another planet and crashed in these remote mountains. So Kyle, you were not far off.
Wow.
Now the inhabitants were coming in peace, and they were from a quite advanced civilization, but they also were like kind of small and big bulbous head, and basically they got attacked by the tribes, the tribe that lived in these mountains, who were able to fight them on horseback, and they were bigger and taller, and like basically it seems like this tribe in the like remote mountains of China bullied some aliens practically to death, is how this
Uh,
reads.
oh.
They that basically these taller, bigger horse riding tribe in the mountains of China made life difficult for these aliens, and I think it killed some of them, but then the rest of them eventually took off for other worlds.
You mean that they fucking went up to these aliens, like grabbed them by the wrist and started smacking themselves with it and saying, "Stop hitting yourself, stop hitting yourself," and then they just passed away?
Literally, as part of the thing, it says that the tribe that was attacking them thought that these aliens were extremely ugly and hunted and killed most of them.
That's fucked up. Can you
Yeah, it's like a reverse predator.
Yeah, they would
Or
fucking
like, what is that,
send
Predator 2, I
they
think?
send, like, a
I don't know.
fucking signal back to their, like, home planet, and, like, Glarg is reading the notes, and he's like, "My god, the f the inhabitants of this planet thought these people were ugly as shit, so they fucking killed them.
Yeah.
We're not going there anymore."
Here's a literal translation of one of the hieroglyphs that gets passed around. This is probably the most frequent referenced passage from the Dropa Stones. It says, "The Dropas came down from the clouds in their aircraft. Our men, women, and children hid in the caves 10 times before sunrise. When at last they understood the sign language of the Dropas, they realized that the newcomers had peaceful intentions." Now, this is slightly different than the whole like they got bullied to death thing.
A little bit.
Um, but that's this is where I might be getting a little ahead of myself. So the Dropas in here are an alien race. They are the beings that came down and crashed in this mountain in their spaceship and ended up living in these caves effectively before maybe getting bullied to death, and also some of them leaving. There's also an actual tribe uh like natives in these mountains known as, there's two tribes. There's the Ham and the Dropa. But the Dropa is spelled slightly differently. I think it's actually like more romanized as like Ziopa.
Okay.
Um and there it gets really messy in how they get referred to in different sources, because sometimes they're talking about the alien race that maybe was, if you believe the ancient alien side of this thing, they're the ancestors of this native tribe in the mountains of
Oh
China and
my
Tibet.
god. Okay.
And in other cases, they're just a native tribe that lives there, and like the
And they
name has
happen
kind of
to
been brought along through. There's a whole thing where this gets. Here's the thing that delighted me about this whole thing. Matestagrest shows up
Oh
again,
my
and we'll
god.
get to
Now
that. But there's this whole thing where all of this stuff ends up like the research ends up getting filtered through like Russian ancient aliens researchers,
oh my
and
god.
that is how it kind of
That's
gets to the West. So there's this big diversion between all of the different versions of this story that it is very difficult to like fully grok where all of it lays out.
that's fucking crazy. Now, did they consult were the was the native Dropa, were they consulted on whether or not they were their ancient aliens origins was put out there, or
I don't now I'm not certain, but I don't believe so.
yeah,
I never
I
found an
wouldn't,
interview.
yeah, hey, I wouldn't expect it
Yeah.
to. So,
But the thing that the thing that I kept coming across was basically like, oh, these people are like very small and frail. And from what I can
ugly
tell,
as
the native
shit.
tribe aren't like there's not a lot of detailed stuff about them out there, like because it's a very remote, small tribe in like the mountains on the border of China and Tibet. And I didn't find and like trying to Google them is very difficult because of all the Dropa Stone stuff and like it's kind of a mess. So, but as far as I can tell, they're just a native tribe
Right,
that live in the mountains.
right.
And I've got a little more on that later, but yeah. So back to this. Uh, there's another section that expressed regret by the Ham tribe. They were the ones that basically bullied the Dropa.
We're
It-
sorry for killing the aliens with our bullying.
you're
Please
you're not far
forgive
off.
us.
Like the passages that they talked about, I didn't find the specific passage. I just found like people summarizing it, and it basically is just like they attacked out of fear because these people came from the sky, looked weird, and were in their area, so they attacked.
Oh,
And then eventually in the Dropa Stones, it records like actual regret by the Hum tribe for doing that.
oh, those were aliens? Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, so that explains a whole lot. One, about how ugly they are. Uh,
Yeah.
but like a lot of things are explained by that fact.
Yeah. So also since the initial like archaeological exploration of this stuff, they've done more research in the Bayankara Ula Mountains. So they eventually found these actual like the actual tribe that lives there and stuff. So that they had like found these people that they were kind of linking to these stones and the aliens and stuff, and it really just gets very muddied because it really feels like as soon as it there's a big thing that we have to talk about a little later about this that is the reason why all of this is so confusing.
Okay.
And
I mean, you know me, I love big things. I'm here.
yeah, so
here for it.
I'm just gonna keep going and we'll wrap back around to it in a little bit. Um, so they eventually did find the tribe, and in the kayfabe version of the story, the tribe does resemble the aliens depicted in the hieroglyphic story. In like bulbous heads, kind of lanky and scrawny and small, and ugly. uh, that is the description that is in the kind of kayfabe story of all of this. Um, and they match the skeletons that were found. So they eventually did actually date the discs, and the discs date to about 12,000 years before that point.
Okay.
So they're very old.
I thought you were gonna say they eventually did date the aliens.
No,
They got over their prejudices with their physical appearance, and honestly, eventually they were just totally into it.
yeah.
And that's how the
Well, I mean
the
that is kind of the thing with like if the Dropa are actually ancient alien like descendants, then there is some sort of like intermingling hybridization happening.
somebody had to give it a shot. That's all I'm
And
saying.
in part of that, they did like take some stuff with this native tribe that they found and said that their racial background was quote unquote a mystery, and they didn't line up with the genealogical stuff of the area. And they believe that is because they are descended from these aliens. So at this point, in the mid 60s, late 60s, that's when Russian scientists get a hold of this
Okay.
and want to see the discs. So several of these Dropa stones were sent to Moscow for examination. They took scrapings to remove any like rock particles that were stuck in them, to kind of clean them up for analyzation, and they were put through a chemical analysis. They found that these discs contained large amounts of cobalt and other metallic substances. Also, some places refer to it as a quote unquote special turntable, and others refer to it as a type of oscilloscope, which I'm guessing is the real version of it. These discs would vibrate in kind of a strange way. They reacted to the oscilloscope um, turntable, I guess, in kind of a strange way, and vibrated and hummed in kind of an unusual rhythm in a way that seemed to indicate that at one point they either were used as part of an electrical circuit or were actually charged with electricity.
Well, then why are they putting their dang messages on it? What?
You know,
Why would you?
it's
Whatever.
maybe it's a way of recording information, some sort of hard drive thing. I don't fucking know. That is the thing. Also, remember we're in Russian scientists that have ties to ancient aliens
Oh, that's
things.
true.
Though
And
you have to remember that a lot of their ancient alien scientist stuff was anti-Christian
yeah,
propaganda
that's
for the
right.
West.
That's right.
So that is the twist of all of these things. Whenever I'm looking at a thing that has ties to Russian ancient alien stuff specifically, I always have to put it through that lens because they are specifically looking for reasons to believe ancient aliens happened because it disproves Christianity, which is a symptom of the plague of the West. And
Right.
that is interesting to me that
No,
that is like the reasoning.
it's super fascinating. I wish we had a better like read on how much, because like presumably other places have engaged in propaganda with these weirder topics, aliens and cryptids and stuff. And I just I wish we knew more.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty crazy. Do you think that the Russian guy who made a homunculus out of an egg in his own semen, that was like a propaganda thing? Have you seen this?
I don't know if I have.
Oh
No.
man. Hey, if you're out there, Google Russian semen homunculus.
I don't know if I want to, but I feel like I should for the podcast.
There,
Now,
there is a guy who claims to have created a homunculus by injecting his own semen into an egg and incubating it.
interesting.
Uh,
Like a chicken egg?
yeah, some sort of yeah. It looks like a chicken egg.
Okay.
It's so check that out if that sounds really cool to you.
It's a breakfast from hell.
God.
So it was at this point that people like Eric von Daniken and Peter Colosimo got word of all of this kind of stuff and became very interested in it. A lot of this stuff actually got propagated to the West in Eric von Daniken's second and third books, Return to the Stars and Gold of the Gods.
Which yeah, Von Daniken is a prominent
Yeah.
Ancient Aliens author.
Although the first place it actually appeared in text was Robert Charew's work, and has since
Oh.
basically just been put into ufological lore.
Robert Charoux. Have we covered him?
I think he's
He had
popped
to have
up here
come
and
up
there.
because I recognize the name. I recognize the name. I just don't remember when he would have come up, but I definitely know that name.
I don't know. I feel like I'm not. I swear, everybody, I'm not trying to do a bunch of Ancient Aliens episodes. I keep finding interesting tidbits that then lead me to finding out that they have ties to Ancient Alien shit. That's just the world that I'm living in right now, I guess, and I
We-
need to like take a detour.
We've ended up in our own sort of like paths with this stuff.
Yeah.
You've got Dumb's Ancient Aliens. I've got Ghosts, and we've established this, but you've got a firm foothold on the Ancient Aliens side of this stuff.
It was not my intent.
I've dabbled in it, but you know more, I think.
Yeah, it's fun though. I enjoy it. So after he published his report, we're going to go back and talk about Professor Sumun Noi. After he published his report, he emigrated to Japan, basically because he was getting made fun of in the scientific community. He seemed his research was not taken seriously. It basically led him to kind of leave
He's also
and
really into anime.
Yeah, he
Wanted to see
decided to
the
go work on some early Astro Boy.
sakura blossoms.
Yeah. Now, he was working on a manuscript when he died, which was actually not that long after emigrating to Japan. Um, now, this is where things start to get interesting because when you look at the word or the things that make up the name or Professor Sum Un Noi, skeptics claim that the name of the professor does not actually exist in the Chinese language.
Uh-huh.
The um this like the syllables don't exist in either Mandarin nor in Cantonese Chinese. Um, but if you are an ancient alien scientist that wants this guy to definitely have existed, there's a passage in a book, The Satellite of the Gods, co-authored by Peter Cross and this other guy that I found this information with. Um, he points out the name was originating because basically Sumonoi is a former Japanese name adapted to Chinese language,
Wh-
and it's basically talking about how like when immigrants would come into America, a lot of people would get a slightly altered, like
Right.
anglicized name,
Right.
and so this is you can look at Sumonoi being a version of that, but from Japan to China.
Okay.
So
That's they're performing they're working hard to make this man exist, like you said.
basically,
I think we're coming close to the thing that I've heard about this particular story.
so the primary source for the report on the Bayankara Ula findings come from Japan. They were first published in German in July of 1962 in a magazine entitled Das Vegetarische Universum, which is, I believe, a vegetarian like lifestyle magazine.
Okay.
Um, and it then gets like you also have like the
Fuck?
Russian side of these things. Basically, the if you try to trace the information and the sources of this stuff,
Right.
it gets
It,
very weird very quickly.
yeah.
And you basically find out that all of this stuff very well could have just been
This
entirely made
this
up.
is the thing that I have heard about this is that it's a fucking farce. It's something that somebody put out there and crafted.
Especially with the fact that of the 717 discs in total that they supposedly found, there are no completely intact stones known to remain in existence. They are supposedly stored in various museums in China. However, none of these museums report any trace of these discs.
Yep.
And they also could not find any reports of the ones sent to the USSR for analysis.
Yep. This is the thing. They don't really exist, do they?
There are pictures of some of them,
Yeah.
but they don't exist. It but this is still very heavily
No,
referenced in lore for ancient
that's the
aliens.
thing. Yeah, it's super tied into it. And like with any of these things, it's like, oh, does it not exist or has it been covered up super hard?
That's the thing because we're not even done with like people doing research on the physical stones that supposedly don't exist. I've
Right.
got more. Um but yeah, like the discs in these museums cannot be found at all. Now, some people think this is China suppressing the information because there is a whole thing in ancient alien conspiracy and in kind of conspiracy in general that China as a whole is descended from like an alien race.
Oh,
And there's a
what
prehistory to China that is extraterrestrial in
this
origin, and the Chinese government made a concerted effort to hide this from the general public.
wow. They okay. So certain people really needed to like really take their racism to a super weird place because that's what it sounds like it's about to be.
I mean, yeah, like this ties into the whole like yellow emperor thing possibly being
Oh,
alien.
that's true.
So
That is true. And that story, as far as I know, does kind of originate from China. So,
yeah, so
eh,
there's a bunch of stuff like that. I didn't look too much into the whole like, oh, China is birthed from extraterrestrial side of things because it's a little outside of the scope of
yeah.
what I was trying to talk about here. But that is a theory I came across while doing research for this that I could probably try to turn into an episode sometime in the
Now that I
future.
think about it, though, it's like I don't, I don't know if because like when I found the stuff where it was like the lineage of all of China coming from the Yellow Emperor, uh, it was like English stuff. Like I don't think it was like Chinese sources saying, "Hey, by the way, we're descended from an alien." So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm curious. That's definitely something worth looking into.
Now, in 1974, a man named Ernst Wegerer, who was an Austrian engineer, took photographs of two discs that met the descriptions of the Dropa Stones. He was touring the Bonpo Museum in Xi'an when he noticed these stone discs on display in this museum. He claims that he saw a hole in the center of both of the discs, and hieroglyphs were, spiraling in grooves around the disc, but they were starting to crumble from age. He asked the managers of the Bonpo Museum for more information on these pieces, and the manager knew nothing of the stone's history, though she did was able to recount stories of a lot of the other artifacts in the same exhibit that were not these discs. She only knew that the stone discs were "quote unquote" unimportant cult objects.
Unimportant.
Because of this, Wegerer was allegedly allowed to take one of the discs in his hand. He estimates that the discs weighed about a kilogram or about 2 pounds, and that had about a 1 foot diameter. So we got a full on 12-inch disc here. And there are some photos that he took of those that you can find online, where the like hieroglyphs have kind of crumbled and they're a little they look a little worse for wear, but they are like 12,000 years old. So go figure. Now, a few days after his visit, the manager that he talked to was supposedly called away from her job without any explanation, and the two stone discs disappeared along with her. Um,
Okay.
and this is according to Professor Wang Jihun, the director of the Bonpo Museum, in March of 1994. So yeah, that is like the background of all of these things. I also have some like timeline events here that people link in with the history of these discs and also the Dropa people. Um, these are from various historical documents. The first is from the Travels of Sir John Mandeville from 1322 A.D.
Mm.
It states that river, Delay River, goeth through the land of the pygmies, where that the folk be of little stature, that be but 3 span long, or approximately 70 centimeters. They be right fair and gentle after their qualities, both the men and the women, and they marry them when they be half year of age and get children.
What?
And they live not but 6 year or 7 year at the most, and he that liveth 8 year, men hold him right there passing old. So basically, in 1322, Sir John Mandeville supposedly found a very short race of people in Chinese mountains, that people tie into being this race of Dropa people, but he also claims that they only live for about 6 to 8 years and have children when they're about 7. So I don't know exactly if that matches the alien lore, unless the aliens very much, you know, get, have a very short lifespan here on Earth for some reason.
The furtive pygmy so easily forgotten.
Yeah. Now, in 1911, there were reports of various sightings of extremely dwarfish beings in Tibet and surrounding Central Asia. Then in World War II, an Australian on duty with the Allies in central China talked about several encounters he had with a dwarfish tribe in central China, even up until his death. He said they were much smaller than the pygmies from Africa, which are about 140 to 150 centimeters. And even this man's grandchildren still talk about this to this day.
Mm. Okay.
Then in 1947, an English scientist named Dr. Carol Robin Evans traveled to the quote mysterious land of the Dropa in Tibet or in Lhasa. He met the 14th Dalai Lama, and he was abandoned by his Tibetan Sherpas who were afraid of the Bayankara Ula Mountains because that was avoided by local people because of some of the strange inhabitants there. After quite a bit of traveling, he reached his destination and he found a few hundred dwarfish people, approximately 120 centimeters in average, living in a remote valley in the mountains. Supposedly, he snapped a photo of the Zopa ruling couple, Huipe La and Vizsla. He stayed there for about 6 months and learned some of their language, history, and traditions. Um, and one of the grandchildren of the religious guardian, the kind of like hype, almost like a religious figure of the tribe, told Dr. Robin Evans that they originally came from a planet in the Sirius system about 20,000 years ago, and again in the year 1014, two Zopa exploration missions traveled to Earth. In 1014, they crashed in this mountain area, many of them died, and survivors could not leave Earth. Now, Dr. Robin Evans was eventually revealed to be an imaginary person from a book entitled Sun Gods in Exile, published in 1978.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of this book.
So a lot of people think that that is where some of the lore of this comes from.
Okay.
The maybe even the name Dropa or Zopa might have something to do with this book that was published by the book's quote unquote the book's editor. David Agamon is the actual author of this book. So it's funny how much you come across like science fiction books, and because of like, I don't know how like fact checking was so hard back then, how like a book that is entirely fictional sometimes just gets like absorbed into the alt science community
Yeah.
or the conspiracy community and just like takes on a whole new life. Like that seemingly is where Hollow Earth came from. And
Yeah.
it still is to this day, like baked into the lore.
Yeah. People, it's really crazy. Like, I'm assuming people just were like, man, it would be really funny to prank everybody with this fake shit I made up, and I don't think anything like the internet will ever be invented. So,
Yeah.
I might as well go for it.
Now
But the thing is
Yeah.
though, the only time that I can think of it being outed back when it was happening, when somebody was crafting a story that was completely fake, was because the guy who basically created the Philadelphia experiment hoax
Mhm.
had too much weird information about like military stuff in it.
Right.
And so like that's why he got like investigated over it. And that's the only time I can really think of that happening. Is
so
like,
as long as you don't go too deep on like military high tech stuff in the
Yeah.
military, you might be able to pass your story
like-
off for 100 years or so.
up until like the 80s or 90s, like people would not like it
Yeah.
would be harder to find that information. It's interesting.
Yeah. Back then, microfiche was a lot harder to find, and you didn't have the internet.
Now it's like you can't. People fucking. You'll post like a picture of like the like lower port, like your foot like standing on it. And people like, I know that the dirt that you're standing on is in this location in this particular coordinates, and like people will just like
Yeah.
fucking find everything. Although I guess they could just get data off of your image, but
Yeah.
like people can find anything now, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, it's much easier. The World Wide Web is the reason why we've been able to do 299 episodes of this podcast.
Yes,
If this were 30, 40 years
it
ago,
would be
this
much
would be
harder.
people would be wondering why are you recording and what is a podcast?
Yeah.
So thanks the internet. Now the last like historical thing that I wanted to bring up here, in terms of the timeline, is in 1995 in the province of Sichuan in central China on the eastern border of the Bayankara Ula Mountains. A pygmy village was discovered with about 120 individuals ranging from 65 to 115 centimeters in height, living a self-sufficient, quote-unquote, medieval lifestyle. Basically, no technology, like just basic simple
Chinese
machines.
Amish.
Yeah, well, except for it wasn't by choice. This was an undiscovered
Fair.
thing. So they were unfamiliar with any sort of modern technology, and some people think that the stunted height was caused by a high level of mercury in the soil.
Oh no.
So also people think that genetic configuration is the cause. Basically, as far as I can tell, this is real. Chinese authorities don't deny the existence of the quote-unquote village of the dwarves. However, the village is not open to foreigners. It is up in the Bayankara Ula Mountains, and basically where the provinces of Qinghai and Sichuan meet. But there isn't a lot of research done on this because while the Chinese government doesn't deny it, they also don't seem to be, beaten down the door to like do a bunch of research.
Yeah.
It's
probably better to just leave them alone.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need. There's no reason to. Like, it's they're living their lives. It's fine, but there are people that in the ancient aliens community, in the conspiracy community, that will basically believe that these are descendants of the Dropa.
Oh my
So
god. Okay.
there you go. Now I mentioned earlier there are a couple other kind of ancient discs that people liken to being close to this, and those are bi discs, like bi discs, that are found throughout China. They're made of jade or nephrite with a round or square hole in the center, close in concept to the Dropa discs. These date back to the Neolithic period, but are found up until the Shang Dynasty. Now, these are mainly more just like ornate, carved with dragons, snakes, fish, and sometimes were used in ritual ceremonies. But a lot of times they were found in grave sites buried beneath the head or feet of the deceased. And it's theorized but not confirmed that this was some sort of religious significance to
Mm.
guide the spirit of the deceased. Um, Now, various authors, including Hartwig Hausdorff, who's written about the Dropa discs, have linked these um, have linked the Dropa and the Bi discs as maybe having some sort of either parallel thought or some connection, but it is not really confirmed in any way, shape, or form. Especially since the Dropa discs, as far as we know, don't actually exist.
Right.
So
Important to remember.
yeah. Now the other thing that people will liken this to is a thing called the Phaistos disc, which is a disc of fired clay from the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete.
Mm.
And this is an actual disc. It was discovered in 1908 by an Italian archaeologist, Luigi Pemier, in the Minoan palace site of Phaistos. He discovered 241 tokens comprising 45 distinct signs, which were made by pressing hieroglyphic seals into a disc of soft clay in a clockwise sequence towards the center of the disc. So you can find pictures of this online. It just looks like a disc with like this like swirl of like characters and stuff going through it, and like visual signifiers. Um, some people have worked to like translate this thing, and there are places that claim that it still hasn't been translated. There's also a archaeologist known as who named where is he? Named Gareth Owens, who may have cracked the code of this whole thing, discovering that it a religious text to a pregnant goddess named Astarte, the goddess of love, and that it might be in kind of the telephone game of ancient religions. That might be a predecessor to Venus,
Oh,
effectively.
okay. Okay.
Now, there's another person that links the Dropa Stones to an alleged piece of Roswell debris that had
Mm.
been sent to Art Bell.
Oh my. Okay. Okay.
If you go on Art Bell's website at least at one point, it was under a page known as Art's Parts.
It's just a bunch. It's just a gallery of his genitals.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of tasteful nudes. Now, this is like a metal disc that supposedly came from the Roswell crash site that has these like there's no hole in the center as far as they can find, but does have this series of this like groove that runs around it in a very small, um, just very fine way. This really looks kind of like it looks like a pressing plate for a vinyl record is what it looks like to
Mm.
me. I've got a picture of Art's Parts here.
Oh
Um,
God! Show me the disc.
yeah, Oh, sorry, I showed you the dick, not the disc.
Damn.
So yeah, that is the those are some things that are supposedly linked to it. Uh, that is kind of the end of the kind of kayfabe stuff here, and some of the history. But let's talk real quick in wrapping this up about some of the kind of
The reality.
the reality of the
Drop the
situation.
kayfabe. The curtain call on the ancient aliens discs.
Yes. So this was from a site I think called Bad Archaeology. Um, and
Okay.
the earliest source for the Dropa Stones story comes from an article in a magazine called Literaturnaya Gazeta on the 9th of February 1960. It discussed the speculations of Matesta Agrest, that
Mm.
aliens might have visited Earth in the remote past and left traces of their arrival. It was then reprinted in its entirety as hypotheses, assumptions, and guesses. Does the trail lead into space? by Valentin Isakovich Rich and Mikhail Borisovich Chernenko in a magazine known as Current Digest of the Russian Press.
Hmm.
This also contained the story that about the kind of the like basically the space alien part of it before the supposed Sumun Noi translation even existed. So this was published in um, like before the Sumun Noi supposedly even translated the discs, which brings a lot of this into question. Now, some have also believe that Valentin Rich and Mikhail Chernenko also were pseudonyms and never existed.
Oh my god.
However, they did publish a book in 1964 called Through the Magic Crystal, A Story of Ideas, which talked about artificial diamonds. And Valentin Rich published a book called The Hunt for the Elements in 1982 and In Search of the Elements in 1985. So they appear to have been some level of genuine popular science fiction writers or science writers.
Maybe going by a pen name?
Could be a
or-
pen name. It's really not known.
That's weird.
2 years later, the story turned up in a July 1962 edition of, here it is, Das Vegetarische Universum, a German vegetarian magazine,
Wonderful.
which published a story attributed to Reinhard Weigmann entitled UFOs in Ancient Times, The Hieroglyphs of Byron Kara Ula. Now, in this case, the story is attributed to a news agency in Tokyo entitled Dina, D-I-N-A, but no one has any record of this organization. So that
oh.
organization also seems to not exist, but it could be actually a German organization entitled Deutsche International Nachrichtenagentur, which was some sort of actually I really do not know what that organization is. That is just the one claim that these people think might have been what they were referring to. That was not a Japanese organization at all. It was actually a German organization of some kind. Now, the same story appeared again, entitled or credited to Reichard Weigmann again in a German UFO magazine in 1964. However, no trace of the author can be found outside of this story. So, yet again, they may not exist. The Russian translation was then condensed by Vyacheslav Zaitsev in the English language magazine Sputnik, the Russian Digest, dating from 1967, where it was called Visitors from Outer Space, Science versus Fiction. Now, Sputnik was a very sensationalistic magazine, kind of like the National Enquirer.
Okay.
And so this seems to be where it kind of started taking up note in the West, was in a National Enquirer type magazine published by Russia that was not super like believed. And that's the fucked up thing is like when you dig back into the pedigree of this story, that like so many of the things that the people that wrote it, the organizations they reference, the people that do these things, half of them just don't exist.
Yeah, I feel like you could pull like a lot of things that get commonly pulled by ancient alien theory stuff. You could seriously just pick it apart to the point where the foundations of ancient alien theory would just completely crumble.
Yeah.
And this is a big one.
Straight up, like the whole like archaeological exploration of this thing by Professor Chi wasn't even part of like the first versions of these stories. That was pushed out again in like the 1964 version. And some dates were changed. They added like crashing UFOs. Like this seems to be a thing that like when it didn't catch on immediately, they went and changed some stuff, put it in a different magazine and published it again. And so this whole thing is like entirely this like wild telephone game of somebody
bullshitting and having fun.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, that's mainly the story.
It's crazy. Like it's crazy that we don't know who fucking was taking the piss. It just is like, yeah, we can tell it's probably bullshit from this, and this, but we don't know who put this out there originally.
it honestly, like, it's hard to even tell because so many of the people are just like, they don't have any other published stuff, so they might exist, they might not exist. We don't know. Like,
Yeah.
it's funny how many of the stages in this, it's like someone took the information from this magazine, published it over here, but both authors may or may not be real people. So a lot of pen names, a lot of weird shit happening. I truly don't know. So yeah, there is an actual Dropa tribe, which is better translated as Dropka, which is Tibetan meaning solitude or inhabitant of high pasture lands. And basically, they're a group of semi-nomadic tribes people that live on in the Bayan Earl Call Mountains.
Okay.
So they're just like, it's just like a thing. They're just people that exist, and they don't have any extraterrestrial history. A UFO didn't
Most people
crash.
don't.
Yeah, there's no real Dropa Stones. They seem to have taken elements of like the Bi discs and ancient alien lore and all this stuff, and through all of this, just like mishmashing it with a nomadic tribe that most people don't have access to ask questions. So that seems to be the etymology of a lot of this stuff. I of course can't confirm that because I'm not in Russia in the 1960s or in Germany. But as far as I can tell, that seems to be a lot of it.
Yeah. See, when I ran across this topic because of the Yellow Emperor, I do recall looking into it a little bit and immediately finding a thing being like, it's all fake. Don't bother,
Yeah.
basically. And being like, okay. But I didn't realize how much was attached to this. I really didn't. Because, like, when I read about it for the first time, I was just like, yeah, these are like discs that supposedly were carried by aliens, but it's fake. And that's all I
Yeah.
knew. That's all I
The
knew.
three main scientists that supposedly did research and found these discs, Chu Pute, Sumun Noi, and Ernst Wegener, all three of them cannot be found anywhere else in any other record. One of
Well,
the main person that wrote the story, Vyacheslav Zaitsev, and also Sergei Lolodov, who also were, both of these people were referenced in, I think even some of them are even referenced in like Eric von Daniken's books and stuff. Straight up nothing.
yeah.
And then Daniken supposedly cites his main source for the story as a fiction writer named Alexander Kazantsev. However, Kazantsev himself says that Daniken was the one that told him the story. So even there, it's this like weird back and forth with no one taking credit and no one knowing where the fuck this story came from.
Yeah.
I think it's
Well,
fascinating.
yeah. Shouts out to whoever accidentally put uh, created a seed of an ancient alien theory thing that would just become foundational to a total crackpot thing forever, essentially.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I want to do that.
Yeah, it's so, this story is so weird in just like I don't know. It's fascinating the more you dig into like where the fuck any of this came from. So
Yeah.
on that note, let's go and move on to a big question.
Hit me.
So if you could take one story
Hmm.
and put that thing onto a picture disc to send off to an alien planet, what
Oh.
story would you shoot into space for alien consumption?
Ooh.
This story can be real, fake, fictional, whatever, nonfiction, anything. What do you
That
think should be given to the aliens?
is an awesome question. So, in this scenario, presumably the aliens will assume that this is a story about a real thing that happened on our planet.
You know, very very possibly.
Okay. Ooh, that's a that's an amazing question. I think it would be really funny to send aliens Eraserhead. They're just like, oh wow, this little disc from Criterion, this Criterion whatever that might be, the Criterion disc shows what life on Earth is truly like.
I do think it would be interesting if an alien race just like watched Eraserhead and it made perfect sense to them on first
Yeah,
viewing, and they like understood all of the subtext and
sure, yeah,
everything that David Lynch like if these aliens could talk to David Lynch, he would finally feel understood as a human being. You know?
we keep these. Yes, of course, we keep our women in our radiators, and that's naturally like. How do you do it here?
Yeah.
David just like, I've been trying to tell people this whole time, women should belong in the radiator. So if you've seen Eraserhead, you know what I'm talking about. If you
I do
haven't,
know what you're talking
total
about.
nonsense, but uh, uh, you know, I think it would be really funny. It's just like you can't just send them like any David Lynch thing though. Like you can't send them Blue Velvet because then they'll never want to visit planet Earth. They'll be like these people are fucked.
Yeah.
But also Blue Velvet is like closer to reality than Eraserhead anyways. So maybe that's hey, maybe that's what David Lynch was trying to say the whole time.
Maybe that was the thesis of David Lynch's extended body of work.
Yeah. Everything else is so weird because Blue Velvet is you're supposed to go, oh, Blue Velvet's like is like more like reality. That's
Yeah.
crazy, bro.
I truly do not know why this is what came into my brain.
I'm so excited
But
to find out.
there is a Judge Dredd story
Okay.
that is about this candy that is so addictive and like good and like it just is so craveable that it has to be outlawed, and then they have to like Judge Dredd has to chase down who's making it, and they end up as part of the like meeting of justice. They, because this person is like powerful, they send the candy maker out into space to like get him away from, it's the only way they could actually get this type of candy out of circulation basically. So they had to send the guy that had the recipe out into space, so, and because like he could still do whatever the fuck, and I forget exactly why they had to do that, but it's a thing that just has stuck with me.
It's sort of like Planet Hulk. He's too powerful, so we can't contain him.
You're
so.
not that far off. Like it's really this thing of like there's some reason why Judge Dredd can't just like shoot him in the head like he does most things. But
he has a candy coating over his entire body that's too good to fucking shoot with a gun.
Yeah. So I think that is kind of this. I honestly think Judge Dredd is like a really fucking good satire. I think that a lot of the writing in it is really interesting. But that's also neither here nor there. And the fact that I just think that story is weirdly delightful and it got stuck in my head. And I literally haven't read this story in probably 2 to 3 years.
And you're gonna send a bunch of aliens out on a wild goose chase to find the irresistible candy man.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna see if they take it as gospel and try to hunt down this like delectable candy that will like ruin your life, you know? If you try it at all, it's gonna ruin your whole fucking life.
It is really funny to me the idea that like aliens just like find a disc that fell from outer space and they read it and they go, well, this has to be true.
Yeah, it's but hey, maybe it's an alien civilization that isn't aware of the concept of lying or storytelling.
Yeah, there you go.
A very literal. So like that's a whole other thing to get into. I'm not going to go on a tangent about like the like implications of a 100% truthful society.
The liar planet.
Yeah. It's all just Jim Carrey. And because the fucked up thing about Liar is it's not just that he can't lie, it's that he is forced to speak when he can't even just shut his mouth. That's fucked up. The rules of that movie don't make any sense. But that's neither here nor there. So I've been saying that a lot lately. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let's take care of some business. If you want to find more of the show before episode 300, get all of your friends into it before episode 300 so they can all bask in the wonderful episode 300 that we're about to put out next week. You can follow us on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
If you want to catch our content after episode 300 or after, go to facebook.com/itsweirdpodcast.
And both before and after episode 300, including episode 300 inclusive, you can find us on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. Look us up. You'll find all 299 at this point. Next week, 300 episodes sitting right there for your enjoyment.
Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Did we have a prompt this week, or are we just accepting any emails?
I think we're just accepting any emails.
Okay,
I think we might have gotten an email this week.
We got an email that looked like a real email until I pulled it up and realized it was a guy trying to advertise shit to us.
Oh, okay.
So, or at least that's what I think it was. But I'll review, and then after episode 300, I'll start reading off emails again, because guess what? Episode 300 is too action packed. I can't take the time to read emails on that one. It's just not going to happen. So,
yeah. I think we got an email, someone saying that we were mispronouncing Crawley.
That is one that we got. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Sorry to the we could have read that on this one. I forgot. I'll do it on after episode 300, and that's a promise. So,
all right.
Patreon.com.
Yeah. There's still more.
Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. You got to support your favorite show, especially now that we're episode 300. You hit episode 300 and you're just like, you're owed at least 10 to 20 more patrons, I think, minimum. So check out patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you're going to get an episode every other week of It Gets Weird TV, where right now we're talking about Gravity Falls, although that's ending soon. And then people get to vote on what our next show will be. So if that sounds kind of fun, I would say check out the $2 tier. But if you want that plus another bonus episode on the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV, so you're getting a bonus episode every single fucking week, that's when you want to go to our $5 tier. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to our main episodes 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday, and you get access to our Discord where we're hanging out and we're fucking talking all the time. We've got a community that's thriving in there. And if that sounds cool to you, please donate to It Gets Weird at Patreon. We have a $1 tier that's just a tip. You don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. Let me kick you $1 every month. So check that out. If you can't donate, you have to. You must. You absolutely have to tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird. Word of mouth. Get it out there. 300 episodes. A congressperson has to listen to this in this 300 episode run somewhere. So please get it out there. Anybody who happens to know a congressman, just fucking tell him, look, I know you're busy with all the politics, but can't you take some time for the world's greatest weird cast?
Nobody is still listening to this.
No, I think that everybody knows we have a bunch of good bits at the end here too, and that's how you do it. You do a bunch of funny bits at the very end when you're self promoting, and then people have to listen to it.
No one is still listening to this. Well, hopefully they'll be listening next week.
Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com if you listen to this entire segment. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. This has been episode 299, and 300 is next week of It Gets Weird. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle signing out.
Peace.